Okay, this video is what are the best study skills. So first of all, just briefly talking about study skills. Sorry to brag, but just to make it clear, because I know a lot of my viewers are new. The old ones might have heard all this stuff before. This is my picture from medical school. This is a book I wrote about medical school, Medical Student's Guide to Top Board Scores. I graduated first in my class. The dean of my medical school, University of Illinois, Dr. William Wallace, wrote the foreword for the book. It was published with Little Brown publishing company. I had initially first self-published it. It was very popular. And then I published it with Little Brown Publishing Company. I had gotten 99% on my boards. Okay. I won the award as best student in my class. Okay. Average Stanford pre-med student has an academic IQ of at least 138. That's thought to be about the average IQ for a Stanford graduate, or 140. The academic skills are at least 99.5 percentile. If you're talking about standard tests, the average standard SAT test, Stanford SAT test score at that time was 1410 out of 1600. Plus, the pre-meds were better students than the average Stanford student. And what I'm saying is, if you want to be an A student in that environment, you need to figure out how to perform at a 99.9% level. Now, a lot of people think, oh, gee, that's impossible. No, it's not. And the reason is a lot of intelligence and academic performance, it's not being genetically born that smart. It's, you got whatever you got that you're born with, but then it's how you use it. And there's a tremendous component of academic performance that comes from study skills and also from personality. So you want to get your personality way of thinking correct for optimal academic performance. And you want to learn these study skills. They make a giant benefit, at least like 30 IQ points. And, understand what's happening. Basically, academics in college and med school are a memorization contest. So you want to get good at memorization. It's good to study memory contest champions. Here's another book I wrote, Straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard. I had gotten 99% on my residency boards as well in diagnostic radiology. This is what I call the magic bathroom. This is before I was taking my neuroradiology boards after fellowship. I would tape all these pictures of neuroanatomy and neurologic diseases to the wall in my bathroom. Of course, this was in the basement bathroom of my old house. My wife wouldn't let me, of course, do this in an upstairs bathroom. And anyways. Okay, here's another look at the magic bathroom. This is a portable table that, you could just slide it with your foot. Anytime you're on the loo, you should be reading a book here. Usually I would have a textbook here, and then you have a paperback on here for number ones, a big book on here for number twos, and I'd have pictures of people who inspired me on the wall, because that would get me, so I was always pretty psyched up. I came from a family that valued academic achievement, and I went to Stanford where there was a lot of value and appreciation of academic achievement. So it was a big part of me. Just like I admired the great athletes, I admired the great scholars. Okay, I also admired great comedians. I got a picture of Rodney Dangerfield on my wall there. Look, I got a picture of Esselstyn. By the time I took this picture, I have a picture of Esselstyn on there as well. Okay, picture of the great Victor Hugo, the writer. I admired great writers. I wanted to become a good writer myself. Okay, so anyways, you have to honor what you want to become if you want to get there. Show respect. Okay, here's my new house. I have this table, in front of the loo. There's a typical textbook. There's the Mark Schultz Foxcatcher book I was reading there. This is at the old house, actually. All these pictures on the wall. Neuro stuff. And when I was learning languages, I'd have these little translator things in the bathroom for whatever language I was studying. I studied a lot of language stuff just for fun. Okay, now here's something really relevant to study skills. These are called Lightener boxes. Lightener boxes are for flashcards, and several of them, this is in my bathroom, above my laundry stuff right there. Several of them adjacent to each other is called a spaced interval repetition system. That's where the word Lightener box comes from. It's just a way to describe flashcard spaced interval repetition system, or some people call it spaced interval retrieval system. Anyways, you pick up the flashcard and you look at it. If you instantaneously know it, immediately, you advance it to the next box, okay? Then you come back some other time and you look at one from here, and if you instantly know it, you advance it to this box, and likewise to this box. So this is the completion box right here. However, if you look at that flashcard and you have to hesitate for a moment, it's not immediately obvious the answer. There'll be a question on one side, an answer on the other side. If it's not immediately obvious, then that means that it stays in the first box. And the point of the Lightener boxes is you spend more time on the difficult ones. You repeat them until it's automatically, instantaneously obvious, the answer, and then it goes to completion box. And this is useful because a lot of students spend too much time studying stuff they already know. With the Lightener box system, very quickly the stuff you already know well gets into the completion box. So it's the challenging stuff that you go over and over again until you really get it. Now, flashcards are good, I would say, for binary information, like for learning vocabulary in a second language. They're good for some simple concepts that are really just a question of recall. They give you more exposure to the material. But what's the catch about flashcards? You really don't do much intellectual thinking or processing of the material. It's almost just one small step above passive studying. So I do like flashcards. I do think they're valuable, but just recognize they'll be more valuable for just memorizing foreign language vocabulary or binary stuff. This is this. This is this. And there's a lot of just vocabulary. There's tons of vocabulary in biology and in medical stuff as well. So they're good for all of that. But there is a great weakness of flashcards. We're going to come to it in just a moment. Oh, by the way, here is condensed notes. These were standard condensed notes, and this was an outline format book that I would use. I would put a whole bunch of mnemonics and all the margins in the back of the book, for example. I cross-referenced everything. For my diagnostic radiology residency boards, it was like a 4.5-hour test. I was done in 1 hour and 10 minutes with perfect score, okay? I say that because I just crushed it as much as you could crush a test, okay? And that's with a pretty good competition. That's really the top 15% of medical school class. Most people were in the top 10% of their class that got into diagnostic radiology at that time back in the 1990s. It was pretty popular. It was, up and coming field. A lot of people wanted to go into it. And so I just tell you that because everything I'm talking about here, it's something that I have spent a ton of time on. I got a lot of experience with this. And so I did a lot of things other. No one else in my whole residency program took notes, right? And also only the senior residents and the attending sat in the front row in conference. I sat in the front row right from my day one. I knew I wanted to be a great student. I didn't want to just do well. I wanted to be great. So I really didn't care. Anyways, no one else would take notes because they thought it looked a little bit uncool. I'm like, what the heck? You go to conference because you want to learn. Why wouldn't you take notes? Okay, you should always be taking notes on anything you're trying to learn because it's a reminder then to study it again later. Okay, this was later on when got a little more advanced when I was taking my neuroradiology boards. I taped all of these anatomical things into this one book. You can see the tabbed indices. So this is condensed notes. It's an outline format book, so I call this outline format condensed notes. And everything's cross-referenced to other books or sources of information. And this one, I not only cross-referenced that, I taped in all these additional pictures because I wanted everything in one spot. When it's crunch time, let's say the last 6 weeks before a board's exam, you want everything in one spot so you can find it all very quickly. Okay, and in the process of deciding what to include, not include, and making all these little margin notes, you really process that information a lot. So this is a super valuable technique, condensed notes. When I was in college at Stanford, I had made like condensed notes in a notebook. I would summarize the textbook on, let's say, organic chemistry or some other subject. In the biology class, we had a biology syllabus, and I just wrote notes in the margin. The syllabus was from the class notes, okay? That's all fine, but what I love about outline condensed notes and illustrated condensed notes is that you keep all the information there. You make a flashcard, it's just sitting in those flashcard boxes. You can't refer back to it. This is a giant advantage of condensed notes is that you're constantly going back to the material and you know where everything is. It's essentially a knowledge management system. That's a good word. Knowledge management system. And so what I'm saying is a lot of people talk to you about study skills. And they're going to tell you they got an A in some class at a junior college. So what I'm trying to say is the stuff I'm talking about, it works against the top level students. This makes you a better student than somebody who's 99%. And by the way, I'm not that impressed by 99%. Just to give you a sense, a 99% student to me is like a C student at Stanford, okay? And if you think about it, think about a college athletic team. Let's say you have, like in my high school, there were 1,000 students, more than 1,000 students in every class. So if you want to make a sports team and be a starter, you have to be 99 percentile just to start on the varsity on a sports team, okay? And then if you want to go to college and you want to start on a Division I team, you've got to be about 99.99%, okay, in terms of athletic ability in that sport. So what I'm saying is when you start thinking what's 99.9, 99.99 percentile, you start paying attention to the details. And when you pay attention to all those details, you get a lot better. So here's a thing of illustrated condensed notes. You can see all the notes in the margin. You see all these numbers. These are cross-references to other page numbers in the same set of condensed notes and to other books. Okay. And making mnemonics are a way to word associate. And then here's one of the things I want to show you, which is actually one of the most powerful things you can do, is doing what I would call a walk and talk. In this picture, I came home from work. I'm reading and walking around in circles around the house. That's something I would often do to get a little exercise, get a little reading. But what I would do is I would take this book and I would put it down on the table, whatever it might be that I was studying. If it was something that I needed to memorize it for academic purposes, let's say for board certification or something, I'd put the book down and I would just walk around. I would talk to myself. As a matter of fact, my family would often make fun of me. Why are you talking to yourself? Are you autistic? Are you crazy? No, because when you can say all the material back, and I used to do this a lot in college and in med school as well, once you can say all the material back, you have the ability to generate all the material. It's a very active way of studying. I'm not just looking at highlighted notes, which is passive. I'm actively saying out loud all the material. So my brain has to articulate the words and it hears the words. So that makes multiple copies of it in your brain and it facilitates retrieval. I never once in my whole academic life ever did an all-nighter. Never once. And I also remember that I really wanted to learn. I really wanted to be educated. And having that personality was a motivator. I had the growth mindset of Carol Dweck, which is about realizing that you can improve. And by doing these walk and talks where I would say everything out loud, I could basically reproduce the entire textbook of relevant stuff such that I was very confident. When I would go into taking a test, I would expect to get the best grade in the class or at least be right up there with the top students in the class, if not the best. I always tried. It wasn't so much I was trying to be the best. I was just trying to master the material as well as I could. And so because of that, I always had a pretty good attitude going into tests. And I would go to bed, at a routine time the night before. And as opposed to, I know a lot of people, they're worried about, are they going to remember stuff? And they're studying at the last minute and doing all-nighters. All that stuff messes up your health. The other thing a lot of students do is they say, oh, you need to drink coffee. I never drank coffee. I never drank coffee until I did my surgical internship. I was on call every other night, okay? I think that's a very bad habit. And so what I'm saying is, I never took any brain stimulant, nootropic, none of that crap. I never would. I'd be afraid it would cause brain damage. I would never do any of those things. So I'm just telling you, most of these so-called, clever little hotshots, in my opinion, they suck. They don't even know what they're talking about. So don't take guidance from somebody who tells you drink caffeine or take a nootropic or do an all-nighter. That's all BS. And I had a friend who was also like A+ student at Stanford, and me and him were pretty much the same. We uniquely were interested in biology. We'd have conversations about biology. In our free time, I would, like I said, go to the nature place and, do biology things, bird watch, map out bird population distributions and stuff like that. My friend would be reading Stephen Jay Gould or something. We'd have conversations about evolutionary biology. So what I'm trying to say is the A students, they're having conversations about the subject. They're not just looking at their highlighted notes. Okay, now here's something that'll sometimes come up. This is called the cone of learning, the Edgar Dale cone of learning. And what this is really about is the more active your participation, the more you remember. If you just read something, you'll often forget much of that. And he'll say, oh, in 2 weeks, some people say in 24 hours, 10% of what you read, 20% of what you hear, 30% of what you see. So looking at a picture is a lot better than just reading something. So it's nice to have a book with illustrations. Okay, the next is if you hear it and you see it. That's why it's good in a lecture to show a picture and talk about the picture. Okay, then if you actually say it. And one thing I know here is whenever you can, I do this all the time. Like when I learn something, let's say I'm at work, I have an interesting case and there's some interesting thing on the brain and I look up something and confirm something, learn something new, I immediately will call one of my doctor buddies and we'll talk about it. Because I know if I have that conversation with one of my doctor buddies, it's good for them to hear about. So in a sense, I'm kind of teaching them something. But there's also a selfish reason. Once I talk about it with one of my doctor buddies, I know from a lot of experience, I remember that item better. And let's say, I've got 4 out of 5 things figured out on that subject. Quite often they'll fill in the gap. They say, you're missing this. Don't you think it's this? And they're right. And then boom, now I've got it. And I'll keep that information locked away, permanently after that. I'll actually, if I got a couple doctor buddies around on the day that I'm working and I come up with something that I think is really good or just learn something really good, I'll call a couple of them and I'll discuss it with them. Because again, it's really helpful to have that information locked away. Another thing I see with young students is to them, they think you know something if you can answer the question correctly on a Scantron test. To me, that's just the beginning of learning something. And what I mean by that is, for example, I look at a lot of brain MRIs. Okay, one of the main things I do is work as a neuroradiologist. And, neurologists come up to me all the time. We have a complicated case. Can you take a look at this patient's brain MRI? Now, could you imagine if I told them, well, I really can't answer any of the questions about the brain MRI unless you give me a Scantron test with multiple choice questions. No, that's ridiculous. I have to look at the films, I have to articulate the findings, I have to come up with a reasonable explanation for the findings, and quite often in a complex case where everything's not already figured out, I have to explain what I think needs to be done next. That's why they're asking my opinion, to figure out what to do next for the patient. So what I'm trying to say is that is active participation knowledge. A good way to think of good learning is how you learn how to drive a car. Everybody learns how to drive a car. You see the pictures in the book, you maybe watch a video in the classroom, then your teacher shows you how to do stuff in the car, and then you imitate the teacher, then you drive with the teacher, then you drive alone, and over the time of driving alone, you get more practice driving in different weather conditions, different type of traffic situations, and you get pretty good at driving to the point where you can do it on autopilot, automatic. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is it's a little bit like that for other things that you actively care about and tend to use in your life. So this is a big point. The more actively you participate in the material, the better. The more you converse about it, then you have to retrieve it. So to just look at something is really the beginning of learning. To start to use that information. So real learning is using that information for something. Okay? So if you're reading a book or an audiobook, you should be taking notes. Highlighting, it's okay. That's just, again, the beginning. That's what an average student does. Okay, nowadays you can watch videos pretty easily on the internet for many topics. And so what I'm saying is you should be writing notes in the margin, dog-ear the pages, or put a post-it note on the ones you want to go back to. What I'll do quite often if I'm reading a science book is I'll summarize it in the back of the book, and even with the page numbers, For example, I'll say aluminum is associated with potentially causing autoimmune disease, and I'll write that on page 77, so that later on when I want to go back over that book after I finished it, I'll know to look at page 77 and very quickly find the information on autoimmune disease. A lot of books don't even have an index, so it's especially important in those books. And quite often indexes aren't anywhere near as detailed as you would want. When I was in residency, I would take notes, throw them into a box, and then when I would come home and I have a free moment, I'd go through all the notes in the box, and that would remind me of what to study. And you remember that stuff much better when you had some emotional contact with it during the day, either through clinical work or through a conference, in comparison with just trying to read a textbook cover to cover. That's relatively boring. Stuff that you're emotionally connected to. Your brain's programmed to think that's more important, and it is, and you remember it better. Condensed notes requires processing of the information, so you have to evaluate, decide, is this worth being put in the cross notes? Is this worth cross-referencing? Okay. If there's old questions from old tests and you can get those, that's a very high yield thing to do. Doing practice questions in question books is good, but then put those notes into your condensed note source. Walk and talk is great. It's fantastic. I actually think this is sort of like the best study technique. Condensed notes and walk and talk. And the reason I say that is they're available to everybody. Every single person can do these on their own and dramatically improve their study skills ability. Okay? So I can tell you this, very few people know how to study. All these kids, they got decent grades in high school just because they're relatively intelligent, but they go to college and, again, most people don't succeed in their academic goals in college. In Stanford, like I said, I got 12 pre-med freshmen in my freshman dorm. Only 4 of us actually completed the pre-med program and went to medical school. And so what I'm saying is, if you just improve your study skills and learn how to study, you better. All these kids are paying tons of money for college tuition, and the vast majority of them have very poor study skills. Okay, but they don't realize it. It's kind of like doctors think they know nutrition. The average college student thinks they have good study skills, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, you don't understand. To me, 99%, that's a failure, okay? You got to be 99.99 or something. I mean, if you want to be successful as I wanted to be successful, what I'm trying to say is it's not like you have to be genetically that smart. I know a lot of doctors who genetically seem to learn and understand things faster than I do. But the reason why I would often know far more than they would is because I have this ongoing intellectual curiosity, and they don't have it. I know a lot of really bright doctors. They sort of, show up, make their money, go home, spend time with their family, and that's a nice life. But somebody who's like that, they're never going to discover anything. They're never going to create anything new. Let's see, what else? Conversation with friends is great. We talked about that. It's one of my favorite things about being a doctor is that it makes it easy every day to have conversations with other doctors. Teaching others is great when available. So if you have the opportunity to teach, I'll even volunteer to give a lecture just because I want to give that lecture, because I know if I give that lecture, it puts sort of pleasant accountability upon you, whereby, let's say I have decided I'm going to give a lecture to residents about some new aspect of brain imaging or neurophysiology. Then I'm motivated to read about that, and it'll energize me to plow through some books, videos, etc. to prepare that lecture. I like making videos for the YouTube channel because when I'm interested in something, I just crank out a video. It energizes me. I mean, I make a video almost every single day, so I'll usually have some idea in my mind. I get up early in the morning and do a prelim outline of it. And then as soon as I get home, I real quick zoom, finish it, and make a video. And I learn stuff and I enjoy it, okay? I give, a few bigger talks every month where I really put a lot of preparation to. I'm always reading and studying something in the background, and then I make these other quick videos. So yeah, that's a great way to. So we learn by doing, sort of an Aristotle quote. Aristotle quote also, the best way to make sure you learn something is to teach it to others. That's all good stuff. But again, if I had to say what's a takeaway point for a younger person who wants to become a much better student in school, I would say you should be using walk and talk all the time, every day. You should be using condensed notes every day. And you should also have a philosophical attitude of it's important to you to learn this, okay? This is one of your major goals in life, okay? That you're going to use and, use that knowledge to help other people. For example, to learn biochemistry. I was interested in biochemistry. I said to myself, biochemistry is the language of God. If I want to be a great doctor or scientist, I must learn biochemistry. And how lucky I am to have the opportunity to learn biochemistry instead of just being stuck like a peasant or a serf, scratching the dirt, trying to get a little bit of food every day, all right? And so when you have that sort of attitude of gratitude and positive, then you're energized to learn. Your brain is programmed to learn. Your subconscious mind is programmed to retain that information and evaluate it and think about it. And I even said to myself, I'm going to become a learning machine when I was frustrated because of my wrestling. I got injuries. And so what I'm trying to say is getting yourself psyched up and programmed. It was like the Alfred Adler inferiority principle. I was so mad about having come back early multiple times and getting injured in sports that it made me enthusiastic to I felt like I had failed as an athlete compared to my potential. So I felt like, well, I'm not going to let myself fail in academics compared to my potential. So I was super motivated. Not even motivated, super motivated. And that's why I think I was able to do so much better in school than lots of other people who have higher genetic IQs than I do. And what I'm saying is if you want to be successful, get yourself psyched up like that. For example, before biochemistry lecture, I would read for a couple hours the night before, as much as I could, so that I had all the vocabulary, I had all the abbreviations, I had a pretty general, decent sense of it. I could get last year's notes. We used to call them co-op notes. I get the notes from last year. I would read the lecture notes before going to the lecture. I was trying to turn that lecture into a review thing. And I was intimidated by a biochemistry professor. So I would sort of like say to myself, they're the past, I'm the future. And I would sit right in the front row like a goalie. I wouldn't want them to get anything past me. And I got to the point where I could start getting about 85% of the material would be like a review to me, versus in the past, I'd be overwhelmed after more than about 15% of the material and have to learn it all on my own later. So getting psyched up, pre-reading the night before, all of that gets you much better. I would actually put 4 books out on my table of biochemistry, and I'd look at all the illustrations, let's say for biochemical cycle like glycolysis, and I'd go, what is the irreducible minimum from which all the rest can be derived? What is the irreducible minimum? And I would just sit there and I would look at it and compare all the books. What do all the books include? How can this enable deriving the rest? What's the least smallest thing I can figure? So you look at glycolysis. It's from where the phosphate is located on the the carbohydrate products and substrates as they go through the reaction. So coming up with something like that locks it in. So anyways, there it is. Hope that's helpful. I think I'm about done with slides here. Yep.